this computer. There it goes. My name is Scott Simmons. I'm the pastor at Faith United Church of Christ, and I'm here with Adam Weaver, who is a member of our church. He and his husband, Jeff, and other members of his family. So we're so glad to have you as part of the church. And Adam is a 3 on the Enneagram. So am I. Maybe that's why we get along. I don't know. But I've asked Adam here just to talk about what it's like being a 3 and what he's learned. So, yeah. What did you think originally as you kind of read what a 3 is? Can you kind of tell us what one is and what you think of that?
Yeah, happy to. So, I think, Scott, I had done the Enneagram for the first time actually last summer with Jeff for our premarital counseling. So, we kind of dug into it about a year ago. And so it was nice with this sermon series to kind of revisit and pull out my old notes that, I had printed off. So type 3s are the achiever, or, the success oriented or efficient type. So I think that, we type 3s are really all about, excelling. We're driven. We're also very image conscious, I think. And also adaptive, meaning that I think we do whatever we can to thrive and succeed in a number of different environments. So we can kind of shape change a little bit to be able to be successful in those. Mm-hmm. I listened to an interesting podcast actually lately about the Enneagram and type 3 specifically. And they said something that really resonated with me. They said, think of type 3s as like being in the Nike zone. So like the people who are always like, just do it. They're very, about getting stuff done and doing it as efficiently as possible. So yeah, I think I wasn't surprised when I got this result after taking the Enneagram. I didn't know much about it, so I didn't even read through the types in advance, but just like reading the results, I wasn't surprised that I got that.
That's me. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's that Nike zone's interesting because one of the books that I've been reading says that 3s, our struggle is to become, like, when we're unhealthy, we can become human doings instead of human beings. I thought that was kind of is right, and our need to be successful or perceived as successful is so hardcore. What do you think made you that way?
Yeah, I mean, so I can definitely think of a couple of things. I think they say, right, like there's something in your childhood that usually makes you have a certain type or way of going about things to solve for an issue you're dealing with, right, as a child, and that often carries into adulthood, whether that's productive anymore or not. And so I think a couple of things that I can pinpoint on this. I mean, growing up as like a gay kid in rural Indiana, I think for me there was a need, or there was a fear of being found out. I as a kid, I don't think that I necessarily knew that I was gay, or like I didn't have the words to describe it, but I think deep down I knew that I was different in some way. And so I think for me, just having a fear of being found out for who I am, I think that I channeled a lot of energy into being the best I could be in everything I would do, so that people would want to have me around. They wouldn't ask questions, right? They're like, oh, Adam's good at this or that, and so we like having him here. Mm-hmm. I think also there's something in the results that I saw that really resonated. I think that it says here, 3s subconsciously feel that their own natural inner qualities are inadequate or unacceptable. And so I think just growing up so the church I grew up in was pretty homophobic. They took that stance. And I think even though I always knew that my family would always be loving and accepting of who I am, and they have very much been, I think just the environment that I was in as a child, in church, things you hear in politics and schools, just constantly being fed that, who I am doesn't deserve to get married or just to have a lot of these basic rights. I think I probably felt subconsciously that I didn't have value in who I was at the core. So I had to make my own value in what I did, to be extraordinary in some way, to deserve, feeling valued. So I'm sure that it's tied to that in some way.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, you definitely done some work to really think through what was it. That question, like for myself in my childhood, like what was it that led me to that? Like that's been kind of hard for me to uncover. I think the first point that I like looked at was, well, I encountered the Enneagram 6-7 years ago, and it was like kids, they grow up in appearances and looking good, all that's really important. I was like, was that really me? Like there's this picture of me from way back that I saw where I was a kid and I hadn't had my hair cut. I had like overalls, no shirt, no shoes. I was like, am I a neglected child? But I noticed my mom putting such an emphasis on my now 9-year-old daughter back then, like dressing cute. Like, oh, right. And then like my dad, he would always tell these stories of like his football team only lost 2 games in 4 years. He lettered in every sport that the school had, which was only 3 because it was a small farm town. But like all these kind of success stories, and I loved him and admired him. And so I think for me, that's kind of where the sense of like, oh, you got to look good, you got to succeed. Dad worked his way up from a farm community to a corporate executive. Like that's how you are. That one was a little hard for me. And like your sister last week shared, at least in the small group, that like she immediately identified as a 2. And for me as a 3, it's taken a little bit more work to see how this actually does help describe my experience. Have you experienced that too? Did you need to go kind of deeper in some levels, or was it just an immediate like, yep, this is it?
No, I mean, I definitely had to go deeper. And I think this is a process of solving, like I've kind of gone down this road to try to solve for some of the issues that we 3s often have, which is to always be busy, and thus you're kind of burying your emotions and true feelings and stuff just to get things done. And so, as a 3, I really had to like sit down and think about, what's formed me, what experiences have I had that have made me who I am. So it definitely took some self-reflection and thinking to get to this point, I think.
Yeah, we are part of the feelings triad, the heart people, and yet supposedly the least in tune with our feelings, which is interesting. But it sounds like your reflection of having to slow down and think, which is precisely what our types need to do, that has helped you kind of come into contact with your feelings.
Yeah.
I just had this hilarious thought. It was such a 3 thought, because I was like, am I always doing, I don't feel like I'm producing enough. And yet I'm always so busy. Like that's always the thing. Like, and people say that, oh, you're so busy, whatever. So I like put off this persona, but I don't think it's enough ever. Right. And I'm always like, nah, I'm not doing that much. And yeah, so I guess that's so the root sin of a 3. Do you know what that is?
It's deceit, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you feel about that?
I think, my initial reaction, like probably everyone has when they hear their root sin of their Enneagram type, is to be like, whoa, that's not me, or, that's harsh or whatever. But I think, as I read deeper into it, it made a lot of sense, because I think one of the main things here is that it's often about self-deceit with type 3s. So it's, you're almost so image conscious that you even trick yourself into thinking that everything's fine. Like I said earlier, I mean, you're always so busy and just you're not someone who can sit still. And so because of that, you're always doing stuff and you don't have the time to sit down and reflect on things that might need improvement, big issues, small issues, whatever it might be. And so I think, yeah, there's like a constant bit of lying to yourself that everything's good because you don't give yourself the time to think about what might not be.
Yeah, that's why it went to the root sin, because as I was talking about me and my experience of being busy, but I don't feel busy, but people perceive me as that and tell me that, and it's like, well, of course I don't feel that way, because my big issue is self-deception. Mm-hmm. You know, and then also, like, this just occurred to me as you were talking. I was like, I do sit down and do a lot of thinking, right? It's a big part of my work. I'm putting together a message every week. And so I'm like, well, I sit down and think a lot, but I'm busy in my head. I'm too busy to deal with this thing with my kid's school, or this personal thing, or, you know, what have you, reaching out to that friend. And so I guess it's like the aha is like, oh, well, I'm not busy in that sort of way, but I'm always hatching a plan. I'm always thinking of something. It's hard to like stop that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, you do know. Yeah. And I just assume everybody else is that way, right? But they're not. I mean, some are, but yeah. So we have a need to succeed, and therefore our big fear is failure. How have you dealt with failure in your life?
I think I deal with failure by trying to avoid it at all costs, which is an unhealthy three behavior, right? I think in this little printout I had after the assessment we had done last year, it literally says, and most threes would rather die than fail and risk being humiliated, which is like some strong wording, right? But I think that, yeah, in definitely an unhealthy way, I operate from out of fear and out of a failure avoidance state of mind. Mm-hmm. So that it's just like not an option. And then I guess, you know, if I do find myself falling short and whatever it might be, personal goals or work goals or whatever, I think that one good thing about threes here is that like we're adaptable, right? So like I can tell myself that, okay, well, I didn't get into the situation that I wanted to, but in the current situation I'm in, I can like achieve here and it's still all fine. You know, you can do a little bit of self-deceit to talk yourself into thinking that it's all good. But yeah, I do everything I can to avoid it, even if it's not healthy. What about you? I mean, what do you do as a three in those situations?
I've been trying to have a practice of like really naming my failures as failures, like just using the F word there, you know, failure. And I have this powerful experience. So back out of seminary, I opened a coffee shop, and on behalf of the seminary, and it was something I put my heart and soul into, and it had like a real vision for the future. And it ended up coming to a place where I resigned because I felt like I had been put in a position where I couldn't win. And I was reflecting with a pastor friend of mine, and I actually preached on it about failing. And this is before I was aware of the Enneagram, but she was like, "You didn't fail," you know, like trying to like lessen the blow. But I remember feeling, man, it actually felt liberating just to name it as that and to be okay with it.
Yeah.
And now, like, reading some of the things about the Enneagram, that's indeed like the magic sauce for us, is to just be really honest and be like, I failed at that, yet I'm still lovable. I'm still okay. Or like when I shared with the church that I was getting a divorce, like that was a failure, you know, like this marriage failed. And But I think like keeping that hidden would have been just so toxic, right? It would have been impossible ultimately, but there's the temptation. And so for me, it's not that I don't think I'm past it, but I think that those moments where I have been able to name it publicly and like share it, has helped me grow quite a bit. I don't fear it as much. And in fact, just recently, like I admitted a limit and I resigned from a board that I was on because I was like, man, I can't show up in the way that I want to at my family, at my church, and on this board. And it was so helpful reading the Enneagram thing because it was like, you are afraid to fail, you'll avoid it at all costs. And I'm like, I'm hanging on to this thing that I really don't want to do, that I can't do. Why? Because I'm like wired to just like, I don't quit. Scott Simmons does, like I stick it out. So yeah, I don't want to like suggest that I've like, overcome this, but I do think that like it boils down to those moments where you like jump in the pool, so to speak, like you name it. And I think for everybody, naming their failures is probably important. And in fact, there was something I wanted to read to you at some point around that. But I think for us, it's like horrifying and humiliating, yet liberating at the end of the day. Wow.
Yeah.
Failure, fun one.
Yeah.
Let me see if I actually on that motif, let me read this to you. So this is from the Enneagram, A Christian Perspective by Richard Rohr and another fella. It says, threes must confront the secret of the cross, which is the secret of failure. Out of our defeats, God makes his victories, not ours. This doesn't occur to threes. This doesn't work. This can't be integrated into any system of promotion. Threes on the way to redemption free themselves from their vanity and begin to hope in God's sovereign activity, which can't be manipulated. They honestly confront their own inner emptiness and longing for love. They renounce the security won by status, money, and power. They renounce building their own kingdom because they hope for the coming of God's kingdom. The failure of the cross and God's victory, not ours. I don't know, how does that land for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely resonates with me and makes a lot of sense with what that quote saying, because I think the whole premise of Christianity and being saved not because of anything we've done, but because of, who God is and because of, his love, it just doesn't make sense to threes, right? Because we have this whole thing about like, we have no value, so the only way to have value is to do things. And that's the complete opposite of what the grace of Jesus is. You don't have to do anything to deserve it. And we operate from a place of doing things to deserve stuff. So it's it makes a lot of sense. It's completely counterintuitive to how we operate, and so it'd be harder for us to accept it and to just let go and let it in. So definitely makes sense.
Right. I'm moved by how for a long time, like I've been just really caught up by grace, right? It's central to my theology and preaching. And then I read this stuff. I'm like, well, no wonder I'm preaching that. I need to hear that. But at the same time, and we'll see if this plays out throughout the series, but my hunch is that essentially that same gospel message of grace is the medicine or the solution for every type. Because twos, right, they get their sense of well-being out of helping.
Right.
And they need to know that even if they're not helping in the moment, that they're still beloved, right? And then for us, it's like succeeding. And fours, they have a need to be like different, like recognized as special.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in those moments when they're not standing out, like they are special, right? They don't need to be playing music or shining or being different or, all that. Like, so I think that's my hunch for this. Essentially the same need all comes back down to this gospel message. Spoiler alert, this Sunday, I'm going to preach about Nicodemus, who's this, I think he's a 3. He's really successful. His name in Greek means the people's victory.
Oh, wow. It's quite the name.
Yeah, right. And he's attracted to Jesus because Jesus is performing all these signs, like he's like succeeding in all these ways. And Jesus tells Nicodemus that he has to be born from above or born again. And he can't believe it. And he talks about that at first, just like all of us need a transformation. But, if we're stuck like as unhealthy 3s and we're succeeding, we're like, no, we're doing what everybody should do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's Nicodemus. And Jesus is like, no. We all need a transformation. We all need to like see that, we have some sort of root sin. And then he starts telling them about the gospel, like for God so loved the world. But he does this weird thing where he mentions the story from Numbers where Moses holds up a snake and everybody was being bit by snakes. And then Moses gets a snake on his staff and he holds it up and they look at the snakes, they're like cured from it. It's like this weird Old Testament story. Mm-hmm. But it's like, just as Moses raised up the snake, the Son of Man will have to be raised up. And so that everybody who believes in him won't perish or something like that, or have eternal life. And I was like, well, he's of course talking about the cross. And so here Jesus is, before he's predicted his death. This is early in the story, but he's with a 3. And of course, at some point in it, he works in the cross, the failure motif. I might be taking it too far, but I mean, it really jazzes me. I'm like, this is so brilliant, And Nicodemus ends up having a heart change. He's like, at the end, he helps bury Jesus. Mm-hmm. I don't know, cool. Right? And he like outs himself, like he's truthful at risk to his success. So there's hope for us, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, any other thoughts about being a 3 before we run it to a close?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you said it earlier that what 3s need to work on is to be less human doings and more human beings. And I think that's just I really need to take that to heart. They say like you need to do less striving, more thriving. This is another way to look at it. So yeah, I think like all the types, we have some good stuff and some stuff to work on too. So
what's funny about all that though, Adam? I'm sitting here going, what in the heck does that even mean to be less human doing? It's like, if I'm going to thrive, I'm going to thrive at the best. I'm going to be so successful.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard.
Like you almost can't escape it. Yeah. Yeah, I am stuck on this idea, and this is an idea that I'm going to introduce into the series this Sunday, is that we all have a type, but we're all more than a type. Mm-hmm. And that the benefit of this, of coming to know your type and your particular like root sin or the thing that causes you to miss the mark, is not simply to produce the fruit of the Spirit for our type, which is honesty or truthfulness. Like we actually can be like real detectors of the truth and really great at like speaking the truth. But it's also to allow us to access the fruit of the Spirit of all the types. And, so kind of the ability to just be like peaceful and at ease That's actually one of the theories. That's when we're not under stress, we can be really good nines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when we get stressed out, what do? Actually, when we get stressed out, we become really bad nines. That is, like, we become really lazy and like avoidant. That definitely happens to me. Sometimes, like, I don't want to do anything, which is ironic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for taking the time, and really, I knew you would have thought through your Enneagram. You're a thoughtful guy, Adam. I really appreciate that about you. And thank you for agreeing to say a few words at church this Sunday.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for asking me. I'll try to follow Whitney. It's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best.
Was she a valedictorian, or were you?
Both. My mom. So
yeah. I wonder where you get this need to succeed. All right, man. Have a great day. I will catch you later.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye, Adam.